Hey there, it's me, Liz. I'm back this week of July 18th to talk about a Monday housing market update here in Southwest Michigan. I'm going to give you a broader view this week, kind of what's happening this summer, what's happening with mortgage rates, where we've been, where we're going, to kind of talk about, are you in a position to buy this summer? Should you still buy? Should you still sell? So, what's happening and what's going to happen with mortgage rates? So, I'm going to give you a history here, back looking in January, so where we were at 3.22%. So, just kind of staying in line where we've been for the last 10 years. And then rates started coming up. I think you're all aware, especially if you've been watching my last few videos, these huge increases after the Fed increased rates. It doesn't directly affect mortgage rates, but because of other things that are happening, inflation, other things that are happening in the market, they did increase the rates. So we've dipped some, but looking back to just the end of June here, we were at 5.81%. So going back to the low rates of the last few years, it was an anomaly. It's a combination of freakishly low interest rates and the Fed intervention in the bond and mortgage-backed security market. So the bond market directly impacts mortgage rates typically. So now the Fed has ended quantitative easing and is raising rates. So we'll look a little bit more here, but this is a more normal rate environment here. It's not being artificially held low. It feels high compared to the last few years, but it is actually just going to a more average rate. So we keep hearing in the news, right, this R number, recession. So, and you might hear a big R and a little r. So a big R is a huge recession and a little r is a smaller recession for real estate. So how would that affect our market? So a recession doesn't necessarily equal a housing crisis. So looking at the last six recessions we've had. So looking in 1980, home prices actually came up 6.1%. Looking at 1981, home prices actually came up 3.5%. 1991, home prices did come down 1.9%. In 2001, we still increased by 6.6%. And then 2008, the crash, prices did come down 19.7%. But a lot of this housing bubble actually contributed to the recession. So these two were interlinked. But looking into 2020, in the last couple of years here, post-pandemic times, prices have increased 6%. So they don't necessarily, except for in the 2008 case where the housing boom actually led to the recession and was a part of that, they're not necessarily completely linked to each other. So looking again at 1980 recession, which went from January 1980 to July 1980, so that only lasted about 6 months, mortgage rates actually decreased, right? From 16% to 11.75%. So if you're feeling like these high 5% right now are really impactful, think about purchasing your first home in 1980 to 1982, where some of those rates were at 18%. So 1981 to 1982 recession, which lasted about a year and 4 months, we went from 18% to 13%. So home buyers at that point felt a huge relief. Early 1990s recession, which lasted 8 months, we went from 11% to 8.75%. So seeing much lower interest rates at that point. Early 2000s recession, so March 2001 to November 2001, that lasted 8 months. We went from 7.35% to 6.75%. The Great Recession, which technically lasted 1 year and 6 months. I think we felt it for much longer than that. We went from 6%. So, I bought my home my first home ever around 2006, early 2006. My interest rate was at 6.5%. That was good at that time. We went down to 4.875. So at that point, we're historic lows. And then we're looking at the COVID-19 recession, which the recession was because everything was shut down. We've had a huge boom since then. But even then, we went from a 3.75% to 2.75%. So they've all decreased during that time. So what's going to happen to real estate for the rest of 2022? So I'm going to give you some predictors, but existing home sales is seasonally adjusted annual rate in millions. So you're looking at 5.5 million back in 2017 to 5.3 2018, 5.3 in 2019. We kind of leveled out here. 2020, as we all know, we had a lot of pent-up demand when we were all kind of shut down for that 2 months, boomed up to 5.6 million. 2021, since we had a full year of being able to show homes and move, went up to 6.1 million, and we're looking at 5.4 million year to date here. So it's not slowing down home sales at all. Forecast update. So we've still had that really low 0.3%. We were looking at still a very low forecasted inventory, original forecast, but now updated based on how the market is changing, that we really should have a huge increase in inventory. So buyers, you are feeling a little bit of the push of the increase of interest rate, but also there's going to be more homes hitting the market and less competition. So if you've been sitting on the back burner waiting, now is your time to buy. Interest rates, again, like I've talked about in my previous videos, you marry the home, not the rate. So when you find the right home, a recession, if it does come into play, more than likely interest rates are going to come down, which would be an opportune time for you to refinance. So, is it a good time for you to buy a home? Again, going back to homeownership as a hedge against inflation. So we'll look at homeownership versus inflation back in the 1970s. So inflation rate was at 7.1%. Home price appreciation was at 9.9%. So they realized, almost a 3% appreciation over inflation. So it was a good hedge. Now looking in the 1980s, your home price appreciation was lower than inflation. So at that time, it may not have been the best time to buy. Looking at the 1990s, so inflation rate was at 3% and home price appreciation was at 4%. So they realized about a 1% difference. Again, 2000s, inflation was higher than home price appreciation. So not as much the good time to buy. 2010s, same thing. Inflation was at 1.8, but home price appreciation, flipped. And so they're realizing here a over 3% hedge between the two. 2020, we were at 1.4%, so very low inflation rate, and 9.2%. So that was the time to buy, right? Because you have a huge hedge against inflation. We're now looking into this year. We're at 6.8%. So, and then I think some of the numbers came out last week. We're more at 9%, but appreciation on home prices is more at like 18%. So you do the math there on hedging against inflation. So should I buy a home right now? Home price forecasts for 2022. So looking at the average of all 7 forecasts, but we pull from a lot of different sources: Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, CoreLogic, HPES, NAR, which is National Association of Realtors, Zelman, and MBA here are looking at all these different ones, and the average is forecast here is at 8.5%. So that's around inflation right now, a little bit lower, but we're looking at least home prices will keep up with inflation. We don't want to be in a position where home prices don't keep up with inflation, and then it's not as much of a great time to buy. So looking at potential growth in household wealth over the next 5 years based solely on increased home equity. So if you purchase a home for $390,000, which is the average home price in January 2022, looking at how much that will appreciate based on the home price expectation survey. So it looks like you would appreciate from 2022 to 2027, so 5 years, $102,000 in equity. So again, if you're thinking of renting versus buying, you're looking at growing your generational wealth or your wealth personally by about $102,000 if you purchase a $390,000 home. So thanks for joining me. I feel free to call my office. We're at 269-281-4186 to speak to a real estate agent who's knowledgeable in what our market has been through and where we're going to go. So to speak to somebody directly and speak with a knowledgeable agent. Thanks for watching.